Welcome to Pulse of Africa channel, your reliable place for real up-to-date news from across Africa. If this is your first time here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you stay updated, informed, and connected to what's really happening from across the continent. Your engagement keeps our voice alive and strong. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information, official statements, and other authentic online materials. It is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. We do not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our sole objective is to provide context-rich insight into current affairs, amplify local perspectives, and support informed dialogue across Africa and the global community. In a commanding and unapologetic address to the United Nations, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso delivers a bold speech, not as a polished diplomat, but as a leader for the people. He opened by saying he didn't come with flowery language or political polish. Instead, he came as a representative of the 22 million citizens of Burkina Faso and as a voice for a continent that has endured centuries of suffering, silence, and exploitation. Traoré made one thing clear: Africa is not begging, it is not broken, and it will no longer bow to global systems that disguise control as cooperation. Traoré criticized what he called false generosity. He pointed out the contradiction in foreign aid. While African countries receive donations and development assistance, foreign corporations simultaneously drain the continent's resources. According to him, Africa is offered vaccines, but the patents remain locked away. Wells are built in villages, but rivers are poisoned upstream. He acknowledged that true humanitarian help is welcome, but stressed that Africa seeks justice, not charity. He reminded the world that Africa's borders were drawn without African input, and that modern systems of control now wear suits and ties. Contracts signed in European capitals continue to dictate the fate of African resources and governments. He stated that peace cannot exist where arrogance lives, and that the West must unlearn its belief that Africa needs saving. Despite its wealth in minerals and natural resources, Traoré said Africa is constantly labeled as developing. He blasted the logic that calls it development when foreign companies control local gold mines and oil fields while African children go without schools. That is not development, he said. That is legalized theft. He called for a new vision of progress, one that centers people, education, health, and dignity, not foreign export profits. Captain Traoré questioned why African nations are considered unstable when they make independent decisions. Why, he asked, are partnerships with non-Western nations considered threatening? Burkina Faso, he declared, has chosen a path of sovereignty. They will decide their alliances, and that decision is not an act of rebellion, but of maturity. Traoré addressed the conflict in the Sahel, particularly the terror threats that plague the region. He accused global actors of profiting from conflict, turning African pain into a recurring business model. Peacekeeping missions that never end are not peace. They are subscriptions to suffering, he said. He vowed that Burkina Faso would fight terrorism on its own terms, not through dependency on foreign interests. Touching on migration, Traoré spoke of African youth dying in the Mediterranean Sea, not because they hate their homelands, but because their land has been robbed of opportunities. He called migration a symptom, not a disease, and the cure, he said, is not border walls, but global fairness. Traoré condemned the lack of African representation at the United Nations Security Council, despite the continent being home to 54 sovereign nations. He questioned the fairness of a global system that allows only a few powerful nations to veto global decisions. This is not balanced, he warned. This is betrayal. On the topic of spirituality, Traoré acknowledged Africa's deep religious heritage, but he challenged religious institutions to stand with the poor, not the privileged. He argued that faith must be decolonized and must amplify the voices of those crushed by greed and globalization. Traoré emphasized growing unity among nations like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. He said this unity is not about war, but about protecting dignity. He called Pan-Africanism a lifeline, not a political slogan, and pledged to build it with or without international approval. The president ended his speech with a powerful message to the youth of Africa. He called on them not to envy foreign passports, but to believe in their own roots, names, and nations. You are not a curse, he said. You are the blessing. In closing, Traoré declared, we will not bow to fear, we will not bow to foreign banks, and we will not bow to outdated empires. Africa, he concluded, is not asking for a seat at someone else's table. It is building its own table where every child has a place and no voice is silenced.
Honorable delegates, heads of state, leaders of nations, Distinguished representatives of peoples great and small, I greet you not as a career diplomat, nor as a man bred for banquet halls and handshakes. I do not come to you speaking the rehearsed language of polished politics. I come to you as a soldier of my people, as a guardian of a wounded land, as a son of a continent that has carried the cross of the world, yet has never worn its crown. My name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, and today I speak not only for the 22 million souls in my nation, but for a continent whose stories have been twisted, whose pain has been ignored, and whose dignity has been repeatedly auctioned off at the altar of foreign interests. Africa is not Tobago. Africa is not a battlefield. Africa is not your experiment, your puppet, your warehouse of raw materials. Africa is rising not to kneel, but to stand. And today I say before this great assembly of nations, Africa will not kneel. One on the false generosity of global politics. For decades you've sent us aid with one hand while extracting our lifeblood with the other. You build wells in our villages while your corporations drain our rivers. You donate vaccines yet patent the cures. You speak of climate action yet continue to fund the very forces that burn our forests and dry our lakes. What kind of generosity is this? The kind that feeds the mouth but silences the voice. The kind that keeps a man alive just enough to keep him dependent. We are not blind to this hypocrisy. Let me be clear, we are not ungrateful for sincere humanitarian assistance, but we reject a global order that disguises exploitation as partnership. We reject financial institutions that lend with one hand and steal sovereignty with the other. Africa no longer wants charity. We want justice. We want control over our own destinies. Too on the chains of colonialism and its modern descendants. Our wounds did not begin with us. They were inherited legacies of an empire-building madness that saw us not as humans, but chiefs as cargo laboratories. My ancestors were not consulted when maps were drawn with rulers and compasses in Berlin. The borders of Burkina Faso, like those of many African nations, were not carved by our ancestors, but by men who had never stepped foot on our soil, who knew nothing about languages, our tribes, or our spirits. Today, colonialism has a new face. It wears suits, it hosts forums, it signs contracts in Geneva and Paris and Washington. But it still takes without consent. It still dictates instead of dialogues. It still silences instead of listening. If you want to talk about peace, then let's begin by unlearning the arrogance that peace is something only you can teach us. 3. On resource exploitation and the myth of development. They call us developing as if the theft of centuries did not set us back. As if the gold from our lands, the diamonds from our rivers, the oil beneath our feet did not build the very skyscrapers in which this assembly sits. Let us speak plainly. Burkina Faso is rich, Africa is rich. Rich in minerals and culture and wisdom and youth. But you have taught us to measure richness in GDP and export value. You call it development when a foreign company owns 90% of a gold mine on our land. You call it progress when your security forces guard cobalt mines but not our children's schools. That is not progress, that is piracy with legal documents. From now on, we will define development on our own terms.
Traoré's speech has sent ripples through diplomatic circles. In West Africa, many see it as a turning point. Citizens in Mali and Niger echoed support for the message of unity and self-determination. Analysts describe the address as a direct challenge to the global status quo. While Western governments have not yet officially responded, experts say it puts pressure on international institutions to re-examine their relationships with Africa. Critics argue that such defiance could isolate Burkina Faso from key donors and security partners, but supporters say that independence is more important than approval. One political analyst in Senegal told Pulse of Africa, "What we saw today is not just a speech, it is a signal, a declaration that the age of silence is over. Whether the world agrees or not, Ibrahim Traoré has made Burkina Faso's voice impossible to ignore." Captain Traoré's address to the United Nations may go down as one of the most daring speeches in recent African diplomacy. Is this the beginning of a new era of African leadership, or will the world push back against this bold new voice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. For more news like this, subscribe to Pulse of Africa channel and stay connected to the heartbeat of the continent. Thank you for watching.